so much for being here tonight. My name is Brian Brown, and I am honored to welcome everyone. I serve as the Government Affairs Chair for the Northeast Johnson County Chamber of Commerce, and we are here on behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council, which for this area will be confined to Northeast Johnson County, and we also have, well, we don't have horses, it's all us. We are very pleased to present to you our Prairie Village Mayoral Forum, in which we will have two candidates. This event is also being filmed today, so for any individuals that aren't here that you wish to be able to disseminate this, share this information with them, we will have this information uploaded to votejoco.com within about 48 to 72 hours, so if you feel compelled to share that, feel free to. If you want to find out more information on any other candidate races as well, you can find out more information at that website. Today, our official timekeeper will be Deb Settle, the CEO and President of the Northeast Johnson County Chamber of Commerce. We have ensured that her watch has Swiss accuracy on it as well, too. Questions for this event have been prepared ahead of time. The questions have not been shared with the candidates. We will not be taking questions from the floor. However, each candidate has been asked to graciously stay after and entertain individual questions from individuals after this event. At this time, I would like to begin by introducing our candidates who are running for the seat of Prairie Village's next mayor, Mr. Eric Nicholson, and current councilwoman, Serena Schmoll. For today's format, the candidates will have 4 minutes to provide opening statements for you. We will go through and provide or ask 6 questions of each one of them, at which time they'll have 2.5 minutes to provide responses. And then they will be providing closing statements, which will be limited to 3 minutes each. There was a random selection of who will participate first, and at this time we will hear the opening remarks from the Councilwoman Serena Schmoll.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to thank the Northeast Johnson County Chamber, and Deb and Mike and David for having us. My name is Serena Schmoll. I currently serve City Council Ward 2. I've really enjoyed my time on City Council. I'm a wife, mother of 3 daughters, 24, 14, and 12. Grandmother of 2 grandsons who are 5 and 1. Small business owner for many years. I do safety, recruiting, and retention services. I specialize in federal motor carrier safety regulations. Trucking companies hire me to audit their company, get them ready for an FMCSA audit, and part-time with that I also do team building with them, work with the trucking companies with each department, starting from the top, from the CEO, all the way down from the county sales and maintenance department. We take each department and find ways to utilize their services to build that safety culture. There are a lot of federal regulations with trucking companies that they must adhere to. That with the state regulations, with hours of service and maintenance records, drug and alcohol programs. So it's a lot of paperwork and compliance issues. I've been in transportation for almost 20 years. I've served on the Oklahoma Trucking Association, Kansas Motor Carriers, and the Missouri Trucking Association. I currently serve on the National Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. My service with the Prairie Village started on the Arts Council. I ran for council, when I ran for council, I was the vice chairman of the Arts Council and the marketing director for the Jazz Fest. I'm a proud graduate of the Northeast Johnson County Leadership Program. Getting involved and becoming active in many facets of our community has been the highlight of my life. The energy and ideas that I've been exposed to while working with many of the city and county has really inspired me to get involved in public service. The many engaged discussions and passionate deliberations I've experienced participating in the county and also on city council with residents and other council members and city staff and other stakeholders has ignited my desire to lead and facilitate to work us ahead. This is not about what I can do, it's about what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Really quick, I know we've got a draft here. Can everyone hear okay in the back? Everybody's good? Okay, thank you so much. We'll now hear the opening statements from Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you, Brian. It's actually Eric Michelson.
Michelson?
That's okay.
So Michelson, Schmoll. Got it.
It's okay.
And for the next 2 weeks, I don't care how anybody pronounces it, as long as they know how to find it on the ballot. Thanks, Deb, also, and to the Northeast Johnson County Chamber for hosting this. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to anybody who's watching the video. Appreciate the engagement. That's what makes Prairie Village strong more than any mayor or council person ever could are engaged residents, like all of you, who care and who do what they can to help their leaders show good government in Prairie Village. So thank you. Again, my name's Eric Michelson. I've raised my family here in Prairie Village. Been here for 14 years. Before that, I worked my way through college. I graduated from Stanford University, and then I worked my way through law school at KU. I've been a practicing lawyer, a business lawyer, in the community for the last 25 years, where I've been creating jobs and building area businesses. I've been, while I was at KU, I was on the law review there, and I've published an article on the cost-benefit analysis of environmental policy, and I've published several business law articles over the years since, and I'm a frequent speaker at legal education seminars on business law in the community. Currently, I'm a partner of my law firm, Stinson Leonard Street, and a business owner there. Stinson Leonard Street is a national law firm with over 500 lawyers. I'm the practice leader of my firm's investment management group, and I'm the most recent, actually not the most recent, we just had the next annual ceremony. I'm the past recipient of my firm's annual Pro Bono Impact Award given for service to the community. I've been on the Economic Advisory Board of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a graduate of, if any of you are familiar with the Civic Council's Kansas City Tomorrow program, it's a civic leadership program in the Kansas City metropolitan area that I'm a graduate of. I've been a Metro Ambassador for the United Way and the past president of the business law section of the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Association. I've also been a municipal judge. I've served a fellowship in the United States Congress, U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. I've been an adjunct professor at UMKC's Business School, and I'm a proud graduate of the Prairie Village Citizens Police Academy. At least one of my fellow alumni is here. Yes, thanks, John. He's in my class. I've been a director of my Homes Association, the Prairie Hills Homes Association here in Prairie Village. I've been married to Margot Michelson for 18 years. She's the president of the Shawnee Mission East PTA, where all three of my children currently attend school. Over the years, I've been a public school advocate and was one of the founding members of the Game On Public School Advocacy Group, which advocates for adequate funding in public education, which is essential to strong cities. I served a full 4-year term on the City Council of Prairie Village, where I was the Parks and Rec Vice Chair, the Finance Chairman for 2 years, the Planning Commission Liaison. I served as the Arts Council Liaison, and I served on the Tree Board. We got 2 brand new parks added to Prairie Village during my tenure there, something I'm very proud of, and several council people here participated in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we both got 2 very talented individuals, and certainly with the leadership of Mayor Washington stepping down, Prairie Village is definitely going to miss a tremendous leader, but we're looking forward to installing either one of you as the next mayor. So given that you guys have just given us your background, I'll start with you, Mr. Michelson. What do you believe is the most important skill or competency that distinguishes you from your competitor, and how do you feel that would best benefit Prairie Village?
Leadership is the answer to that, Brian, and that's a complex set of attributes that includes things like a foundational education and job skills and experience that involve bringing people together. I am a deal lawyer, which means my job is to bring people together to do deals under very tough circumstances, very tough negotiations, sometimes under a lot of having to clear a lot of obstacles to get there. These are skills that served me well on the council. For example, when we were negotiating the Meadowbrook Park deal, we had some very high integrity but tough negotiators on the other side with Van Trust, the developer, and the county, who were the other major parties in that. So my deal experience has been very helpful in that regard. I'll stop there.
Thanks. Councilwoman Sherman.
I think it is leadership, responsiveness, team building, and like I had said in my opening statement, I've worked with many facets, from drivers to executives to salespeople to owners, and trying to find that middle ground in order to build the business where it's not shut down. And most of the companies that I deal with, a lot of the times, it is whether they're going to make it or not make it. And being able to have that collaborative, whether it's a driver or the CEO, where you can bring them together. And the differences, I think, are the engagement and responsiveness with residents. I mean, that is my number one. I have voted twice in the last 2 council meetings that stand for what I believe in. Sometimes not an easy vote, but when it comes to residents and making a hard decision, I do stand up for what I know the residents have said to me since May 10th, and fight for what they believe in. And I have the ability to work with council members, because as mayor, you only vote if it's a tie or if it's an ordinance. And so you have to work with those council members to find out what's important in their ward and bring the council members together on those issues.
Thank you very much. I find it interesting that you both had cited leadership as that is a very important quality, obviously, for someone that will take the mantle of being here in Prairie Village. One of the skill sets or attributes of a leader is also being very visionary. So, Ms. Sherman, I'll start with you. What do you feel is the infrastructure project, or what infrastructure project do you feel needs to be addressed in Prairie Village at this time?
Our streets, at this point, we're budgeting at 3.5 miles per year to redo the streets. At this point, we have 30 miles of streets that are fair and poor. And in looking and talking to former council members and other council members that are currently serving, we really need to figure out where in the budget that we can make that more of a 5 miles, because at this point, it would be 8.5 years to address those. And so from an infrastructure need, I think that that's very important.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marcus, a question to you.
I mean, obviously, we need to keep our roads up, and we do. We keep our roads generally in good shape. There's a intent to the fact that some of our roads are in fair condition. My opponent cites that as a reason why we need to spend more money, presumably raise your taxes, to repair the roads and refinish the roads more often. I actually hear from time to time that we do roads too often in Prairie Village. I have heard that more than once in my tenure. So there's, and it's a debate we have every single year at the council. We could do our roads more frequently and take them, the ones who are poor, and do them more quickly, or make sure they never get into poor condition, but that involves an additional millions of dollars. The way we've found the balance in the past, and I'm comfortable with, is we have several, a category of roads in excellent condition, a category in good condition, a category in fair condition, and then a category in poor condition. And when they fall into poor condition, that means within the next few years, you're going to be the next road, the next street that moves up to excellent condition, because we're going to redo it. And that's an ongoing multi-year cycle. I think we've hit a pretty good balance, and I think we just kind of keep moving ahead with what we're doing there. Can we have gold-plated streets everywhere in Prairie Village that are all brand new every year? Of course we could. You want to double, triple your property taxes and sales taxes to pay for that? I don't think that you do. I think we need to maintain those. I think a higher priority for improvement, I'll cite 3 areas, kind of in increasing cost. One is drainage. We have increasing severity of weather events, severe weather events that are causing more flooding in Prairie Village than we ever have seen historically. And we have identified several low-lying areas that require some significant expense to mitigate the flood damage that's being caused to city facilities and neighboring houses. So that's, I think, the infrastructure priority. It's not sexy, it's not fun, and it's very expensive, but I think we need to do it. With increasing density, we have more rainwater runoff we need to pay attention to, and that's going to be an increasing priority. The good news is there's a lot of matching grant money that we can get from SMAC and other sources to do that. Some other less expensive but equally important infrastructure priorities to me are to implement our bike pedestrian plan, which we've approved in the city. and also to install some additional electric vehicle charging stations.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, as well. So I'm gonna use your words, for Councilman Michelson. I'm gonna use the word sexy. Let's talk about sexy, okay? I will give you the opportunity. What amenities would you say you would like to see come to the city of Prairie Village that we don't have right now, that are more sexy, that more people would enjoy? What would that look like for you? And how would you be able to work to build collaboration with your team to get those projects into Prairie Village?
Well, one that I think is kind of sexy, but it's also going to become increasingly a necessity, are the electric vehicle charging stations that I mentioned. We're already a little bit behind the curve in Prairie Village. Roland Park has some, Kansas City, Missouri has a lot of these. Several of the major car manufacturers have already announced that they're going to stop making gas-powered cars entirely over the next decade. So I think we need to get out in front of this and get some electric vehicle charging stations in City Hall, the parks, maybe the shops, and we're having those discussions, and when I'm mayor, I'm going to make sure that those get the full attention that they need. I guess it all depends on what your definition of sexy is too. I think bike pedestrian improvements fit into that category as well. Across the country, you see this as an amenity that young families especially are demanding in their communities, and we're in Prairie Village, we're in competition with a lot of great adjacent Johnson County cities for where people buy a house. I think that to the extent we implement our bike pedestrian plan and make this a bike walker friendly city, even more so than it is now, we're going to do ourselves a big favor, economically and otherwise. We've done a lot of that. We had some tough battles, but we got that done on Mission Road between 71st and 75th. Now you see families out there walking with their dogs and their children in that school zone. That was an improvement project we got done when I was on the council, and I'd like to continue to implement those. The final one, and this is already in the pipeline, but this was one of the reasons I ran for council, Brian, because I felt that 5 years ago we were severely underparked in Prairie Village. We did not have enough green space in Prairie Village, and we were running out of opportunities if we ever wanted to add parks. And so, you know, Serena, Terrence, Brooke, Jory, Courtney, I hope I've named all the council people here in the room. We all came together and we added 2 new parks in Prairie Village over the last 4 years. And boy, is that, if there's anything in a city that's sexy, wait till Meadowbrook Park opens up. There's going to be playgrounds for the kids, there's going to be exercise equipment for the seniors, there's a new sledding hill, there's going to be miles of additional walking and bike paths, and it's going to be larger than Loose Park by acreage, more than doubling our parkland. And then the North Park is the smaller park we added as well.
Thank you very much. I can't say sexy anymore because my mom's in the room and I'm starting to get question to you, are there any amenities in Prairie Village that you feel the city lacks today and that you would like to see come to the city? And if so, what would your leadership look like in trying to build collaboration and bring those projects here?
Well, one of the #1 things is the volunteer corps. I think we've lost a lot of committees over the last few years, and we have other committees that we actually need and services that our residents could, easily provide, finding their strengths and their skill sets that they could offer, the residents. It took me about a year to get appointed to the Arts Council. I still went to the meetings even though I wasn't a voting member and volunteered, but it took about a year to get involved. And in that process, I realized that there are a lot of people that want to get involved, but they can't get involved. And so I think that having a volunteer corps where, whether it's the city council and the mayor has something that they want to put an ad hoc committee together, that they have volunteers that you can look at that skill sets and make sure that happen. Maybe you work with nonprofits that you could provide clean up Saturdays where you could help aging residents or areas where you've had code violations, where residents who want to volunteer 1 time a year or 100 times a year, that we'd have that ability to do that. Again, I think the bike paths are important. I think we need the shared bike program and being active in the NLC. Even as small community as we are between the 2 villages, I think that we could have the shared bike program that Kansas City has. The KC Ride in Aging in Place is very important to me. When I went through the leadership program, I learned that the gentleman who headed that woke up one day and wasn't able to see. And knowing how do you get to work? Well, we have residents with disabilities and also the aging residents, that it's great if they have the ability to pay for to get to and from doctor's appointments or grocery stores. The KC Ride, in order to provide those services to them, you actually have to upload the forms, and those aging residents may not have the ability to do that. So the volunteer corps, you can actually have services available to be able to help those residents, so they're not paying $16 to go to the village to get groceries and come back. And so I think that the accessibility in our parks, being able to have playground equipment that has the accessibility needs that we have.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Before she gives me the stop button.
Councilwoman Shirley, we'll start with you. We're going to talk more about a little bit more getting into taxes and the tax base. Currently, there's a large stock of single-story, two-bedroom homes within Prairie Village. New residents are being erected, more than twice as large as their neighboring homes. How do you propose making the current residents feel welcomed, wanted, and welcome in these changing neighborhoods, and still inviting more individuals to come in and invest in Prairie Village?
Continue what we're doing, I think, is a lot of it. And being able to, we've changed some of our building codes, which I think that has been very hard on the new residents moving in to feel that they're building larger houses next to smaller houses. And we start in phase 2 guidelines, they have to communicate when they're going to build something. So I think that's going to ease some of that. I think that we continue in the bikeability in our parks and our restaurants, and building the businesses and keeping the businesses that we have here will attract those newer residents. Again, on the phase 2 guidelines, and getting residents to come in not for the tear down and rebuilds, but for existing homes to be able to reinvest in those properties. I have concerns on what additional costs that's going to cause them with the phase 2 guidelines. But I think that this community is open and giving, and we just need to continue the community that we have, and communication.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miles, any question for you?
So the question was how to welcome new families?
I'll go agree.
Okay, thanks.
So basically, it revolves around the redevelopment of the existing housing stock. How do you embrace the existing residents and let them feel wanted while still inviting the new individuals coming in to redevelop their housing stock as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, fortunately, currently, we don't have a problem with people wanting to be here. Through great government historically in Prairie Village, parks, great shops, beautiful neighborhoods with charm and character. Everybody wants to be here, live here, work here, shop here, learn here. That's a problem that we don't, that's a good thing that's going on right now in Prairie Village. People want to come in, and that's not going to change anytime soon. What we do have is a historic spike in the number of tear downs and rebuilds, and we've had a huge outcry from the current residents that while most of this is welcome development in terms of replacing some of our 50 and 60-year-old housing stock in Prairie Village, there have been some abuses, some houses that are clearly too large for the lot they're on, some houses that that are tearing down 50, 60-year-old street trees, that street canopy. There's this book that Judy and others are aware of that was published about Prairie Village in the 50-year history of Prairie Village. And from the introductory paragraph to about 5 places in it, when people were trying to describe the unique character and charm of Prairie Village, they talked about the street canopy of these roads that we have in Prairie Village. And that's being lost with a lot of these tear downs. So what we did, what the council did, and I've been very supportive of this, was to enact what's called the Phase 2 guidelines. And this is a clear differentiation between my opponent and me. She worked to weaken those, and then she ultimately voted against those Phase 2 guidelines. I've been supportive of those all along. They address things like street trees, minimum green space requirement, which also helps with the drainage problems I mentioned earlier. These were recommended unanimously by our planning commission and city staff. They were approved 11-2 by the governing body, including the mayor. What they don't do, and this was important to me, they don't regulate architectural style. New families coming in, they can build whatever style they want, they just have to build it with these guidelines in mind in advance. And when I'm talking to builders, they've been working with these in Fairway for years, and they haven't had any problems. As long as they know about them in advance, they say no problem, we can design to these Phase 2 guidelines. I'm very optimistic that this is going to get us closer to that ideal balance between preserving that unique charm and character of Prairie Village and letting new families come in and build the houses with the amenities that they want.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You both have shared the great problem it is to have being in Prairie Village. We have a great educational system in all the schools that we have here. We also have a tremendous first responder team in our fire and our police departments. With the increased housing costs being double-digit throughout Johnson County, when you have individuals like educators, police officers, and firefighters, we find it very difficult for them to live in these environments as well too. And then you supplement the individuals that are on fixed incomes. There's a high majority of individuals that have been lifelong homeowners here in Prairie Village that may not even have a mortgage on their household, yet they're still being encumbered with these higher increased housing costs. And also in addition, knowing that Prairie Village has a very low tax base compared to neighboring municipalities, my question is this, how do we create varied housing options for those individuals so they can continue to live and or live in the community that they work? Mr. Michelson, I'll start with you.
I absolutely share the goal and the concern, Brian. You know, it's a tough thing because it's a goal of this council and the government and of all of us to see our property values not just maintain but rise, and that's been happening dramatically, and that's a success story for Prairie Village. Our home values have been going up, but that does price a lot of people increasingly out of Prairie Village, and I said it before, I don't want Prairie Village to become Mission Hill South. I do think there's value to the community in terms of strengthening our fabric as a community when our cops and our teachers and our blue-collar workers and our restaurant workers can live amongst us. They don't have to commute here to serve us, you know, in all these things you mentioned, firemen. So this is a critical issue facing the city over the next few years. There are a couple of things we can do, a couple of things I've tried to do. One is, when we see a spike in appraised values of homes like we've seen over the last few years, that creates a windfall for the city in revenue. If you keep that tax rate the same and your appraised values go up, you collect a lot more revenue. For the 2018 year, that was to the tune of about $1 million. Now, our expenses go up as well at the city, but that was by well more than the rate of inflation. So even after paying for all of the high level of services and amenities that our residents want, and raising police salaries, which I supported, and staff salaries, we had some money left over that I tried to return in a property tax rate cut to help some of those seniors on fixed incomes who I met at the doors. That's a real thing. That's not a theory. There are some people on Social Security whose property taxes are going up double digits and their Social Security can't keep up. So that's one thing we can do. The other thing we can do is the next developer that comes to us with a special use permit or a public financing request regarding housing, you know, let's maybe talk to them about affordable housing units as part of that and use our influence as a city to create some units. I mean, the Meadowbrook development is great, but that's real high-end development. You know, a starting teacher isn't going to be able to afford one of those units. But I think these are some ways where we can address that problem. It's a very real problem, and it's important to the long-term future and success of this city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. It was a mouthful. The basic gist of that is we have a lot of great things that we embrace here in Prairie Village. How do we allow those that work here, that serve our families, that take care of our kids, that protect us, that keep our houses from burning down? How do we create options to allow those that serve us live among us as well?
I think it's going to take a creative plan, and we want those who serve to be able to live here and affordable. And I want to address the not voting for lowering taxes. We, back in getting ready for the 18 budget, my opponent did make a motion to lower the mill of 0.2 of a mill, which was $50,000. If you take that by every resident in Prairie Village, it equaled up to about the amount of a value mill, $5 per person. Under counsel and direction from Lisa, our finance director, she did not recommend that we do that, and I stood with our city staff and all of the rest of the council with that, and did not recommend lowering the 0.2 of a mill for the $50,000. That $50,000 comes directly out of the streets and the infrastructure that I think we need to keep that money in. And with the tax lid, once you lower that, it's almost impossible to get that back unless you go back to a vote. And being creative, I think you're going to have to work with your, the chambers. You're going to need to work with your county leaders. You need to go and work in Topeka and figure out how, whether it's the homestead law or creative ideas in reference to volunteer service hours and those that are on fixed incomes, that have lived in Prairie Village for a certain amount of time. Are there ways that you can work with the state or our county to be able to maybe put a lien against the house in reference to those taxes for those aging residents on fixed incomes? I think that we are in a situation that you're going to have to be creative, but you're going to have to work with your state and city and county leaders to be able to come up with creative ideas to make sure that we can take care of fixed income and teachers and firemen and police officers.
I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy either one of your solutions actually come to fruition, because I know a lot of people are concerned about that, so thank you. Next question. We'll start with you, Councilman. Will Patrick Mahomes end up living in your district? Looking forward, please. I tell you something. Looking forward, what do you think are the 3 critical initiatives that you believe will move Prairie Village forward in the next 4 years, and get details and funding sources if applicable?
Initiatives.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we both referenced it. I think our parks, with the North Park, being able to come up with a creative, wonderful plan for that in reference to, I would hope, some accessibility options. We have the Village Square that I know that is getting ready to come before council this coming Monday. And being able to look at that, coming up with a parks plan that is strong, and our parks plan has fallen, it's all been done pretty much, and being able to look at that and which pieces of those puzzles can we use to greater Kansas City. That is the center of our city. Which there's so many council members that the parks are their passion, and one of the things that I love about Harmon Park is the almost $1 million of tennis courts that we have. And I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there is a park that they put a couple of tennis courts in, and then they put tennis courts in like we have in Harmon Park, and they brought in a tennis pro, and then they rebuilt an area there. So from 3 years old to 99 years old, there's activities every day, and you bring that community together. So I think with the Harmon Park and being in the center of that, and being able to build the tennis and the parks programming out, I was worked with Johnson County Park and Rec behind the scenes to bring to the Park and Rec's director and to city staff to take over the programming. And I'm really proud that they worked together and brought that before the governing body, and being able to bring additional programming to our residents. So was that 3?
2.5, 2 and 3/4, 3-ish. We can round up. Yeah, I think it's very good. And I think very many people appreciate the efforts.
Well, I think the volunteer corps. Am I stop?
Yeah.
Yeah. The volunteer corps, I think, can make that happen.
Mr. Marcus, what 3 initiatives do you think are most important and critical to Prairie Village over the next 4 years?
Parks are important, and we led some initiatives, and as I mentioned, we have 2 brand new parks coming online shortly. So if I had to describe 3 new initiatives for the next 3 years, it would be these, and these aren't necessarily in order. One would be the implementation of what's been conceptually approved by the council, of the bike pedestrian plan. That's a 5-year plan that could transform this city by connecting not just our car traffic, but our pedestrian traffic and our bicyclists in a way that we've never done before. We have all these beautiful parks, new parks. Let's make sure there's a route for kids to ride their bike from the new North Park or Meadowbrook Park to their homes, to their schools, to City Hall and the pool, or walk on a trail, on a sidewalk. There's gaps in that connectivity throughout the city that we're going to need to address. So that's initiative number one. Initiative number two for me is I would like to, the council has approved a revision of our comprehensive plan, which is due at this point. And I think two of the main things we're going to have to address in that are the challenges of density, the relentless pressure for density in our neighborhoods and in our commercial zones. Do we want to go vertical in Prairie Village? Because boy, our shop owners, the owners of our commercial space certainly do, because that means more profit. But what do we want as a city in terms of density? And a kind of a corresponding question is affordability. So revising that comprehensive plan with some discussions amongst the residents as to where we want to be in 10 years is an important initiative over the next year. And then finally, I mentioned this already, but I'll broaden it a little bit, the electrical vehicle charging stations. Let's get the stations, and then let's look at electrifying parts of the city's fleet of cars, starting with staff cars, codes enforcement, and then I'm told by the chief by the year 2020 at least, we expect to have pursuit-rated electric vehicles as well that are meet all the police standards, to even maybe have patrol cars as hybrid vehicles as well. This is an initiative that we came to a consensus on in the recent environmental forum, the mayoral forum, where the environmental committee hosted it, and this seemed to be something that everybody agreed that we can and should do over the next few years.
Very good, thank you so much. Those are very innovative ideas. At this time, that concludes the question and answer session. We will now hear the closing remarks from Mr. Moccasin.
Thank you, Brian, and again, thanks Deb and the Chamber and all of you for coming out. There are some clear differences between my opponent and I. We've identified some of these tonight. They correspond with some of my priorities for the city. One being the Phase 2 residential guidelines. I think we need to move to a balance, and I applaud the council and the planning commission for adopting those. I think those will retain the character of the neighborhood going forward. We talked about property taxes and my efforts. I'm not promising anybody I'm going to lower taxes, because responsibly each year we have to look at the budget and our expenses. But my record shows that I'm willing to take a look at that and make some hard choices and put some money back in taxpayers' pockets when these appraised values give the city these windfalls. I've served a full term on the council. I've been a municipal judge. I worked to create these two new parks, one of which, by the way, required a creative solution, a TIF, to fund that Meadowbrook Park. My opponent has stated she would never support a TIF, and that means we would not have Meadowbrook Park, which concerns me, quite frankly. I am supportive of a TIF when it works, as in Meadowbrook Park, but I've also stood up to developers and said no to public financing requests, like when they asked for money to build a 3-story parking garage. I made the motion at the Finance Committee to reject that proposal because it didn't make sense. I didn't see the public benefit. I've been a consistent champion of parks and bikeability and walkability throughout Prairie Village. As I mentioned, my business experience, been a successful business owner and business lawyer, building jobs, building businesses in this community. I've been a consensus builder. We haven't talked about the non-discrimination ordinance here tonight. I'm supportive of that. My opponent has voted against it, suggesting that Prairie Village residents should be, gay residents could be denied access to our Prairie Village restaurants, which I disagree with. I don't think that should be the case. I've raised my family here. I've consistently voted in local elections. The first time my opponent voted in a local election was 2016 when she ran for council. I've kept my campaign focused on the voting records, like I've mentioned tonight and just now, and I've refrained from the personal character attacks, and I'm the only candidate sitting up here who has refrained from the personal character attacks and the extremism that has poisoned our political system at the federal and state level, and that for most of my tenure as a council person, we've avoided. I've disagreed with every council person in this room and others on issues, but I've always tried to keep it on the issues and cordial and collegial. And I think that's important. As a result, I've earned endorsements from bipartisan groups like the Mainstream Coalition and Prairie Village citizens across the political spectrum. Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate your vote on November 6th for the future and the good, the common good of Prairie Village.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michelson. We will now hear the closing remarks from Councilwoman Swish.
Thank you again to Deb and Mike and David and the Northeast Johnson County Chamber. You've done a lot for me and introduced me to a lot, so from not just from running for mayor, but I really appreciate everything that the opportunities that I've been able to have working with the chamber and those events. So I'm going to first address the character attacks. I started running for office May 10th, and attacks started very shortly after I announced that I was going to be running. My opponent said to me before he left council that I had done more on council than all the council members combined. Shortly thereafter, after he left, he called me and asked me if I was going to run for mayor, and I told him yes. And he told me he was not going to run against me. The character attack started with I was in the pocket of the builders, pictures of my signs in front of builders accusing me of going with those bids, talking about phase 2 guidelines. He says I tried to weaken them. I made a motion to exclude current residents from massing and green space, meaning that if you decide that you wanted to pool and you put your pool in your backyard, and then a couple of years later you want to put a sunroom on, you may have extended your green space. I do not think it is fair to put the city government in the backyard of our neighbors. I think we need to take care of our drainage, but telling one of our residents and they need to add additional cost or they can't add on to their home because we put green space, I was 100% supportive of the tear down and rebuild part of that, but not phase 2 guidelines. As far as my voting record, Mr. Michelson should probably do his research. The first time I voted was in 2012. I was on contract in Tulsa, Oklahoma for 2013 voting and the beginning of 2014. I voted in 2012 and I voted in 2016. Those were the only legal elections I was allowed to vote in. So you need to make sure you get your facts straight.
Local elections I was referring to.
Mr. Miller, the floor is yours.
The non-discriminated ordinance, I have been very clear. I do not support any forms of discrimination, any. That's for LGBTQ. I am not supportive of an ordinance that only is a $500 fine. It doesn't have the investigation part. There is no budget listed on this. Currently, we're over $10,000 spending on this. I will support any ordinance that's brought forward that protects all residents of Prairie Village of discrimination. It's irresponsible, in my opinion, to vote for something without a budget. We don't vote for a trash can ordinance unless we say we're going to put an amount on it. And I think it's irresponsible to vote for something like that. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I ask for your vote on November 6th. I'm here to serve residents. I will take the hard votes and say no. I will work with City Council to bring people together, but I will never just say yes to say yes. And maybe it's a hard vote and I'd be called names like a racist and a bigot, but I will stand for my beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we can see the candidates are very passionate about the office and the leadership that they will bring to the city of Prairie Village. Let's give them one last round of applause, please. At this time, this concludes our candidate forum. We'd like to thank the Corinth Library for allowing us to use this space. In addition, we'd like to wish both candidates well. 13 more days, I think it is, I heard. You guys will finally get a peaceful night's sleep. So, best of luck. As a reminder to you all, advance voting has started. You'll be able to advance vote all the way through in person up till Monday, November 5th. Then the general election will take place on November 6th. If you would, as I alluded earlier, if you'd like to find out more information about this election or any others, please go to votejoco.com. I would tell you to go to the Johnson County election website, but I can't even find stuff on that website either, so good luck. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Please tell your friends, families, and neighbors that couldn't make it today given to the polls to vote. 29.1% was the voter turnout in Johnson County in the primary election. That is too low. We need to get people to the polls and vote. So thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Have a wonderful evening and God bless.